Because the dead and deadening scenery of the American city of dreadful night is so utterly devoid of mystery, so thoroughly flat-footed, sterile, and infantile, so burdened with the illusory gloss of baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, and Chevrolet, that it is somehow outside the psycho-sexual domain. The eternal pagan psychodrama is escalated under these modern conditions precisely because sorcery is not what 20th century man can accept as real.
I am just a patsy, the Oswald and Lee Harvey, made of my own misery, the footprints of history. I am just a patsy, I solve a conspiracy. I'm slow and I'm easy and I'm waiting for the livery.
I'm just a patsy.
President.
Perhaps the most popular conspiracy theory in history is that Oswald did not act alone in the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. 50 plus years later, and this theory remains as one of the most talked about. According to a recent Gallup poll, a staggering 60% of Americans still believe that JFK was killed in a conspiracy. The Mafia, Lyndon Johnson, the CIA, the FBI, and Castro are the usual suspects. However, one group has its name splattered all over the cover-up, yet doesn't even get an honorable mention. Now, if the majority of Americans are correct, and JFK was indeed killed in a conspiracy, then Freemasonry no doubt played a very integral part, if not the lead role. Concerning the Masonic involvement in the Kennedy assassination, James Shelby Downard states, quote, Mason Lyndon Johnson appointed Mason Earl Warren to investigate the death of Catholic Kennedy. Mason and member of the 33rd degree Gerald Ford was instrumental in suppressing what little evidence of a conspiratorial nature reached the commission. Responsible for supplying information to the commission was Mason and member of the 33rd degree J. Edgar Hoover. Former CIA Director and Mason Allen Dulles was responsible for most of his agency's data to the panel. Is it paranoid to be suspicious of the findings of the panel on these grounds? Would it be paranoid to suspect a panel of Nazis appointed to investigate the death of a Jew, or to suspect a commission of Klansmen appointed to investigate the death of a black man? Representative Hale Boggs, the only Catholic on the commission, at first agreed with its findings, and when he later began to seriously question them, he was accidentally killed in a plane crash. The following information provided consists of source documentation of the Masons involved in the cover-up of the Kennedy assassination, sourced primarily from Masonic publications. The infamous Warren Commission's so-called investigation of the assassination of John Kennedy had a head team of 7 members. Of the 7-man committee heading the Warren Commission, 6 had Masonic ties. 33rd degree Freemason Chief Justice Earl Warren, to which the Warren Commission was named after, was the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of California, was a member of the Red Cross of Constantine, was a wise master of the Rose Croix, and venerable master of the Lodge of Perfection. Future President Gerald Ford was initiated in 1949 at Malta Lodge and became a Sovereign Grand Inspectors General of the 33rd degree in 1962. Senator Richard Russell was a Mason initiated in 1921 at Winder Lodge No. 33 in Georgia. Senator and delegate to the United Nations General Assembly, John Sherman Cooper was a member of Skull and Bones, which was co-founded and tailored to the rituals of Freemasons by Freemason Alfonso Taft. CIA Director Allen Dulles oversaw the illegal MK-Ultra mind control programs, was fired as CIA Director by Kennedy, and was a director of the Masonically founded Council on Foreign Relations. John J. McCloy was the chairman of the aforementioned Council on Foreign Relations and president of the World Bank, and the only committee member without ties to a Masonically oriented secret society was Roman Catholic Hale Boggs, who mysteriously vanished in Alaska after questioning the findings of the commission. Of the 9 Supreme Court justices at the time of the assassination, 6 had Masonic ties. They consist of the aforementioned 33rd degree Mason Earl Warren, 32nd degree Mason Knight Templar Shriner and Ku Klux Klansman Hugo Black, Freemason and Yale graduate William O. Douglas, 32nd degree Freemason Tom C. Clark, who was initiated in Dallas, Freemason and Skull and Bonesman Potter Stewart, and the eugenicist John Harlan II, who was named after former Freemasonic Justice John Marshall Harlan. 2 of the remaining 3 justices, Byron White and Arthur Goldberg, were appointed by President Kennedy in 1962, a year before his death, and were not Freemasons. Most of the aforementioned Masons took the following Royal Arch Degree oath. Quote, "Furthermore, do I promise and swear that I will aid and assist a companion Royal Arch Mason when engaged in any difficulty, and espouse his cause so far as to extricate him from the same, if in my power, whether he be right or wrong." Unquote. Therefore, a Mason, upon passing through the Royal Arch Degree, is prohibited from exposing the crimes of fellow Royal Arch Masons on pain of death. But not only that, he is, as the oath states, told to even aid and assist a treasonous criminal Mason. This is all the more terrifying when considering that these high-degreed Masons were instrumental in covering up the truth about the JFK assassination. And the Masonic connections do not end there, and they seem endless. One such Royal Arch Degree Mason, J. Edgar Hoover, the infamous director of the FBI, who initiated the illegal counterintelligence programs in 1956, became responsible for interacting with and supplying information to the Warren Commission. He was awarded the Gold Medal of the General Grand Chapter of Royal Arch Masons, an award so prestigious that it is given to only 1 Mason per year. Hoover was initiated as a Freemason on November 9, 1920 at Federal Lodge No. 1 in Washington, D.C. He became a charter member of the Justice Lodge in 1926, was knighted at the Washington Commandery Lodge No. 1, and received the 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite. He was also a member of the Grand Council for the Order of Demolay, received the Grand Lodge of New York's Achievement Award, and belonged to the Almas Shrine Temple. And of course, after the assassination, Lyndon Johnson would quickly replace Kennedy as president. LBJ became a Mason on October 30th, 1937 at Johnson City Lodge No. 561 in Johnson City, Texas. Credited with providing the Warren Commission with the single magic bullet theory was Freemason Arlen Specter. Specter was a member of the Pennsylvania E. Cop Mitchell Masonic Lodge No. 605. Situated in the perfect location and providing the snuff film most commonly known as the Zapruder film, a soundless video which quickly became one of the most studied films in history, was Abraham Zapruder, a 33rd degree Freemason and member of the Temple Emmanuel Congregation of the Mystic Shrine. 12 years had passed until the Zapruder film was finally televised, proving that Kennedy's head, after the final shot, went
back and to his left. Shot from the front and right.
However, only 3 days after the assassination, newsman Dan Rather, who supposedly watched the film, stated something entirely different.
A second shot, the third total shot, hit the president's head. His head could be seen to move violently forward.
Dan Rather became involved in Freemasonry at a very young age, joining the Masonic Demolay Society as a teenager. Lee Harvey Oswald passed out Fair Play for Cuba committee leaflets with an address connected to Guy Bannister Associates' office. Well, did you guess it? Yes, Guy Bannister was indeed a Freemason and a former employee of the FBI. His character was portrayed by Ed Asner in Oliver Stone's JFK. Bannister's office just so happened to be located within walking distance of the New Orleans offices of the FBI, CIA, Office of Naval Intelligence, and Lee Harvey Oswald's former employer, the Riley Coffee Company. Guy Bannister, who was investigated by New Orleans attorney Jim Garrison as a suspect in the JFK assassination, has a gravestone with the Masonic square and compass. Upon his arrest at the Texas Theater, Lee Harvey Oswald emerged with a cut over his eye. The Dallas detective who initially cuffed Oswald was Paul Bentley. Care to guess what secret order Detective Bentley belonged to? Yep, he was a 32nd degree Mason. Bentley died in 2008, and subsequent to that, the New York Times published a detailed obituary. It states, quote, "Photographs from Oswald in custody show a cut over his eye. It was caused by the Masonic ring Detective Bentley was wearing during the scuffle, about 20 rows back from the movie screen," unquote. When looking at the actual site of Kennedy's death and the circumstances surrounding it, the Masonic connections become even more extensive, just as much as they are bizarre. The site of Kennedy's death, Dealey Plaza, is actually named after a 33rd degree Freemason, George Bannerman Dealey, who is also the publisher of Dallas Morning News and the owner of A.H. Bello Newspaper Corporation. A statue of Dealey is situated in the plaza. His son Edward Ted Dealey was also a 32nd degree Freemason who took over the reins of Dallas Morning News upon the death of his father. In all actuality, Dealey Plaza itself is an outdoor Masonic temple. By looking at Dealey Plaza, you will notice a Masonic obelisk segmented into 14 parts, representing the 14 scattered body parts of the Egyptian god Osiris. The number 14, in case you were wondering, corresponds to the 14 days between the full moon and the new. The plaque on the base of the obelisk states that Dealey Plaza housed the first fraternal lodge in Dallas, which is now known to be a Scottish Rite temple, most likely Dealey Plaza itself. Atop the obelisk is the Masonic Light of Illumination. Next to the obelisk is the reflecting pool, situated in the very same manner it sits in D.C., denoting the Hermetic concept of as above, so below. According to James Shelby Downard and Michael Hoffman in King Kill 33, the JFK assassination was equivalent to the ancient fertility rite of killing the king. Now, before going any further, it must be stated here that you can't just exclaim that the Kennedy assassination was some sort of ancient ritual without context. The context being, of course, that the grown men involved in the cover-up, who were high-degree dedicated Freemasons and placed into positions of power, actually practiced the ancient mysteries, rites of initiation, as well as mock assassinations. The second thing to keep in mind is that Dealey Plaza itself is an outdoor Masonic temple. The obelisk, the reflecting pool, the astrological symbology, the Masonic blazing stars, the dedication to a 33rd degree Freemason, the double X or double cross on top of the court building, the assassination taking place on Bloody Elm Street, and the strange fact that the things come in threes at Dealey Plaza as it does in Masonry. For example, you have the Triple Underpass, the Trinity River, the three streets of Elm, Main, and Commerce forming a trident. The time in which Kennedy was killed was exactly 12:30 or 1:23. There were allegedly 3 shots, and after the assassination, there were 3 tramps that were seen escorted from the scene, but whose identities are kept secret to this day. The taller of the 3 assassins, according to some, is said to be hitman Charles Harrelson, who once admitted to killing Kennedy, but later retracted his claim. His son and famed actor Woody Harrelson played a role in The Hunger Games, which just so happened to be released in the U.S. on November 22nd, 2013, the 50th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination. But what does this all mean? Why go to such lengths to coordinate the assassination in line with Masonic ritual? Well, in my personal opinion, Kennedy was very much a part of the establishment, molded and shaped from the beginning of his life by his father, who was a member of the elitist Pilgrim Society and designed to fulfill a political destiny. Kennedy was not attacking the Federal Reserve with his silver certificates. He was, in fact, intending to strengthen the Fed and his speech on secret societies was not an attack on Freemasonry. It was actually advocating for a greater secrecy within the media during the Cold War, and his extramarital affairs set him up for political blackmail. The Masonic hoodwink can be described thusly. The myth of Camelot is what is needed to endure because perception is reality. The killing of Camelot was more than a mere political assassination. It was a symbolic act of alchemically reshaping humanity from an age of innocence into childhood's end. In order to understand this, you have to understand the perceived battle between Catholicism and Freemasonry. Catholicism has always had a strange relationship with Freemasonry, and the fact that Kennedy was an Irish Catholic and those behind the cover-up were Freemasons cannot be overstated. On one hand, much of the Catholic hierarchy practices the ancient mysteries. The Jesuit initiations are, in fact, very similar to the initiations of Freemasonry, and one need not look further than the Vatican's pagan obelisk to see what most Catholics pretend not to see. But on the other hand, Catholicism has issued many edicts, papal bulls, and outright condemnations of Freemasonry. Now, the battle between Freemasonry and Catholicism and the intended result was described by Rosicrucian initiate Max Heindel in his 1919 book by the same name, and he stated, quote, "The strife must continue until the battle for the souls of men has been lost or won. The issue is not the persistence of the Masonic or Catholic institutions, but the outcome will determine the nature of the training humanity will receive in the remaining periods of our evolution. The reader is requested to note that we distinguish sharply between the Catholic hierarchy and the Catholic religion, but the former are also our brothers. We firmly believe it to be for the everlasting good of mankind that the Masons should win," unquote. So if we rewind to the Middle Ages, at the time of the Knights Templar, we see the beginning of the strife between modern Masonry and Catholicism. The Knights Templar, who according to Masonic authorities like John J. Robinson are the forerunners to modern Masonry, and were actually becoming extremely powerful through international banking, charging interest to kings. King Philip the Fair of France, who owed the Templars a significant amount of money, arrested the Templars on Friday the 13th, 1307, and demanded that they be burned at the stake, hence Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. Pope Clement followed King Philip's lead and issued a papal bull instructing all Christian monarchs in Europe to arrest all Templars and seize their assets. The date of Pope Clement's papal bull was November 22nd, 1307. JFK's murder was a symbolic ritual of vengeance and revenge on the Catholic Church. In the elected Knights of 9 degree of Masonry, the term vengeance in capital letters is paired with a severed head, denoting retribution. And it just so happens to be that at the very same time the Kennedy assassination took place, the Masonic restructuring of the Church through the Second Vatican Council was taking place. The Second Vatican Council was called on by Angelo Roncalli, Pope John XXIII, the first documented Masonic pope to ever sit on the throne of St. Peter. The killing of the first Catholic president at a Masonic temple, which was subsequently covered up by Masons, to which some were Knights Templar themselves, on the precise date the Templars were arrested by the Pope, during the exact time that the Masonic restructuring of the Church was taking place, is just too much of a coincidence. As James Shelby Downard states, quote, "The ultimate purpose of that assassination was not political or economic, but sorcerous. For the control of the dreaming mind and the marshaling of its forces is the omnipotent force in this entire scenario of lies, cruelty, and degradation. Something died in the American people on November 22nd, 1963. Call it idealism, innocence, or the quest for moral excellence. It is this transformation of human beings which is the authentic reason and motive for the Kennedy murder, and until so-called conspiracy theorists can accept this very real element, they will be reduced to so many eccentrics, amusing a tiny remnant of amateurs and hobbyists," unquote. So does the undeniable multitude of Masons surrounding the Kennedy assassination equal an incomprehensible Masonic killing of the king ritual murder? Is this why an outdoor Masonic temple dedicated to a 33rd degree Mason was picked? According to The Golden Bow by Sir James George Fraser, the ancient killing of the king ritual resulted only when the king began to show signs of weakness or had an illness. Obviously, if this was indeed a killing of the king ritual, an illness would have been required. But we remember Kennedy as a vibrant, upbeat, and youthful president. Surely he couldn't have been sick. But oh yes, he was. He had Addison's disease, a devastating illness that caused him to faint on numerous occasions. For instance, in the late 1940s, one JFK doctor even stated to a friend of Kennedy's, quote, "That young American friend of yours, he hasn't got a year to live," unquote. And perhaps it is just a mere coincidence or a cosmic act of synchronicity, but during the same exact week the Kennedy assassination took place, a film by Route 66 was scheduled to air, entitled, "I'm Here to Kill a King," which was subsequently postponed on the account that it was eerily similar to the assassination. To me, everything we see in the Kennedy assassination was designed to be seen. From the assassination itself, to the Warren Commission's perceived ineptitude, to the so-called findings of so-called conspiracy theorists. It was all done in a ritualistic manner, timed and coordinated with meaning for psychological and ritualistic purposes. Most people cannot and will not accept the ritual aspect of the assassination because it requires people to think of the shadow government as what they really are, practitioners of the ancient mysteries. Now this is unfathomable to most people, and for the most part, they will return comfortably to their prior perception of reality. But the reality and fact of the matter is, the Kennedy assassination was childhood's end, the end of humanity's innocence, and the transitioning from the old world to the new world. We now live in an age of knowing, whether subconsciously or consciously. Modern man now knows the cryptocracy exists, but we willingly accept our servitude, just as Freemason Aldous Huxley once prophesied.
Now, I think what is going to happen in the future is the dictators will find, as the old saying goes, that you can do everything with bayonets except sit on them. That if you want to preserve your power indefinitely, you have to get the consent of the ruled. And this they will do partly by drugs, as I foresaw in Brave New World, partly by these new techniques of propaganda. They will do it by bypassing the sort of rational side of man and appealing to his subconscious and his deeper emotions and his physiology even, and so making him actually love his slavery. I mean, I think this is the danger, that actually people may be in some ways happy under the new regime.
Perhaps it was cosmic fate that Huxley died on the very exact date that Kennedy died. Huxley and his Masonic family had for centuries helped build the Masonic Brave New World that we see before us today. The end of Camelot was conveniently and symbolically sealed with a rose. Jacqueline Kennedy received a bouquet of red roses on the morning of November 22nd. In response to receiving these roses, she stated, quote, "How funny, red roses for me," unquote. To Freemasons, the red rose is a symbol of silence, secrecy, and concealment. It is portrayed in the mysteries as a foreshadowing of death, just as it is in movies like V for Vendetta. Jackie's quote, "Red roses for me," is quite symbolic as well. It comes from a radical socialist, Sean O'Casey's 1943 play by the very same name. O'Casey was anti-Catholic to the core and expressed it tenuously in his works. The play Red Roses for Me depicts the struggle between Irish Catholics and Irish Protestants and is centered on religion and politics. The protagonist dies, and his widow carries a bouquet of red roses to his funeral.
But down in the darkness, a slim hand so lovely carries carries a rich bunch of red roses for me. Her petticoat's simple, and her feet are but bare, and all that she has is but neat and scanty. But stars in the deep of her eyes are exclaiming, I carry a rich bunch of red roses for thee. No arrogant jewel sits enthroned on her forehead, or hangs from a white ear for all men to see. But jewel desire in a bosom so pearly carries a rich bunch of red roses for me. A sober black shawl hides her body entirely, touched by the sun and the salt spray of the sea. But down in the darkness, a slim hand so lovely carries a rich bunch of red roses for me.